We keep on moving, we keep on moving along, we keep on rolling. No, we ain't slowing it down. We ain't slowing down. We keep on moving along.
Hi, welcome to this week's study vlog. I am really excited to talk to you about my new research project, which I am really looking forward to getting stuck into. I also got a new little filofax, which I'm going to be using to plan these vlogs. And I am also using this traveller's notebook, which I made years ago. So I'm really excited about that. I am a huge stationery fan, stationery addict, planners, journals, pens, stuff like that. So if you would like me to talk about them, let me know in the comments. Okay, let's talk about my research project. I'm so excited. So I've been wanting to get my teeth stuck into some proper research, some analysis of primary texts, literary review, and everything that goes with doing a big research project like a master's dissertation, because when I do videos for my YouTube channel, I just don't get the opportunity to do some in-depth research because I have to turn out videos on a quick time frame. So I'm so excited to be able to do analysis of primary sources and to try to do some hieroglyphic translations again, and that is why I'm so looking forward to doing this. But the other reason why I'm really looking forward to doing this is because it is on the same subject as or a related subject as my bachelor's dissertation, and a less directly related subject from my master's dissertation in Egyptology. So my bachelor's dissertation was on the extant evidence for a king called Mentuhotep-Neperpetra, or Mentuhotep II. And I'll talk about him in a minute, but my master's dissertation was on how his forefathers and Mentuhotep himself basically called themselves kings in the way that they talked about themselves and the way that they dressed themselves and other related depictions when they were not actually kings yet, which was kind of illegal in ancient Egypt. The research project is the legacy and commemoration of Mentuhotep II, or Mentuhotep-Neperpetra. So Mentuhotep was a king in the early Middle Kingdom of ancient Egypt. So he was actually the first king of the Middle Kingdom, and he reunified Egypt after the intermediate period, after the Civil War. And he actually came from a non-royal background. There's a lot of nuance to that. There was an intermediate period at the end, after the end of the Old Kingdom and before the Middle Kingdom. And the Old Kingdom is the period in which the kings built the Great Pyramids of Giza and other pyramids, to give you some context. And the Middle Kingdom is a period when some kings built pyramids, but there was a lot of literature, and it's seen as a classic period of Egyptian history in that it's like a high point in culture. Intermediate periods were a period when there wasn't one strong king on the throne ruling the whole of Egypt. Instead, there was a weaker king claiming to be the king of the whole country, but not in reality. At the same time, there were one or more local rulers in charge of their own area of territory, such as Mentuhotep in Thebes, often ignoring the king's nominal control over their land. Sometimes there were battles between rulers and their neighbouring rivals when trying to seize more land, or between the king and his enemies. As such, it's a civil war. Ancient Egypt had 3 intermediate periods. If you're interested in the second intermediate period, I've linked my video on it below. Mentuhotep comes from a line of these local rulers. So his forefathers were the Mentuhoteps and the Intefs. And slowly, over time, these rulers started to adopt more and more kingly attributes. So they might have called themselves by a certain title that was reserved for the king, or they might have been depicted wearing a certain element of royal regalia that was reserved for the king. And they basically ruled Thebes as if they were the king, in all but name, but sometimes in name. And then they would send their army to try to conquer other areas to widen their territory. And Mentuhotep eventually, on the back of what his father and grandfather and great-grandfather had done, became a very powerful local ruler, and eventually was able to fight against the actual pharaoh's army and conquer Egypt. And at that point, when he conquered that northern part that was under the rule of the king, he had reunified Egypt and was now the king of the whole country, the king of Upper and Lower Egypt. Mentuhotep reigned as a successful pharaoh for the rest of his life, building cult temples throughout the country, an impressive tomb, and established Thebes as the new capital city, and it has remained a very powerful city until today. So this is the book that I am using to take all the notes for my Mentuhotep research project. It's a Clairefontaine A4 90 GSM grid cloth-bound notebook, which is beautiful. I love Clairefontaine so much. I used to live in France when I was 13, and there was a shop that sold books very similar to this. They didn't say Clairefontaine on them. Actually said Oxford, and I'm not sure if they're the same brand as the Oxford notebooks in the UK, but the paper was to die for, and it's exactly the same. So they may have been made by Clairefontaine. And I love this book so much. And I've got a few more upstairs. I bought it in a pack of 5. And the paper is just so buttery smooth. And the grid lines are purple or lilac. And it doesn't bleed through. And I don't really think it has much show through. No, you can't see any real show through. And I love it so much. The only thing is it's a bit big to go on my lap to write on, and it takes up a lot of room on my desk, but it's perfect to have a big spread for particular topics. And I've got so many pages that I can fill, so I'm not doing notes on my computer at the moment. I probably will have to change that. When I went upstairs to grab this book, I didn't realise that I'd actually already started writing in it. but what I was writing, which was basic research before thinking about potentially applying to do a PhD on how the ancient Egyptians talked about the death of a king, death of a pharaoh. I wanted to do some research on how the ancient Egyptians wrote about or depicted the king generally. So in texts, in iconography, past, present, and future representations of the pharaoh. So the notes I've got in here are for that research, but they are actually relevant basic information for my Mentuhotep research. And so the other things I've got in here, that's old as well. The other things I've got in here are my new notes, which are Mentuhotep's legacy regarding tombs and other things to do with the funerary world, and Deir al-Bahri, which is where his temple tomb is, king lists, and just some initial ideas of why. Why did Mentuhotep have this legacy? Was it for legitimacy of kings' reigns? Was it because he was a Theban ruler? Was it to do with the reunification of Egypt? So those are ideas I've got at the moment, and I will keep thinking about them. And I love asking why. This is a main point of my research. The research that I'm going to be doing, which is based on primary evidence where Mentuhotep is honoured, remembered, and called something like a royal ancestor, gives us evidence for the fact that he was perceived as such, but by whom? That's one of my questions. And why? And what does that tell us about ancient Egyptian kingship? Anyone can study ancient Egyptian kingship. Anyone can study the norm of Egyptian kingship. So what crowns they wore and other royal regalia, what their traditions were, what the way they were represented in artwork or the way they were written about in texts. And what students are taught is the norm. This is how they were represented. This is what this particular type of royal regalia means. What does the bull's tail that the pharaoh wears mean? That kind of thing. But what you should really do to really understand the peculiarities of Egyptian kingship and kingship ideology and tradition is study the outliers. And I believe Mentuhotep is one of those outliers. He wasn't the son of the previous legitimate king of Egypt, so he didn't tick the main box of ancient kingship ideology. Instead, he was originally a local ruler who had fought his way to more and more territory and power until he defeated the weak pharaoh. In an intermediate period, hereditary kingship, being of royal blood, was much less important than being a strong leader who could keep their people safe. However, once the civil war ended, if Mentuhotep had not been a successful king for peacetime interests, he could have been perceived during his reign and posthumously as a usurper of the throne. Instead, the primary evidence I've been looking at so far shows that he was commemorated by both kings and non-royals alongside some of the great hereditary kings of ancient Egyptian history. It's really interesting to be able to study, to be able to understand the perception of ancient Egyptian kingship. I'm so excited to be able to study it. So I've got my traveller's notebook. I have done some brain dumping. I'm going to be looking at king lists, the place where Mentuhotep was buried, which is called Deir al-Bahri. I'm going to be doing some background research to remind myself of things or to really understand the background of things like non-royals becoming king in different ways, to just have that cemented in my mind. The history of Thebes, because Mentuhotep's family was from Thebes. I'm going to be doing background reading on all sorts of aspects of Egyptian kingship. And I've written a list of research questions here, which I'm really looking forward to investigating. And then I've got my research journal, and I've also got my research diary. I've also got my little book on, I'm going to be writing about my background research. I get stuck into some proper research again, some primary source analysis, some translations of hieroglyphs. Oh, as in I do the translating. It's not so much that I need to do translations. If this was a PhD, I would have to, but it's just that I want to see what the original text was for when things are translated into English. So for example, in Naunton's book, he says that the tombs of royal ancestors, and he quotes this, were inspected, and that includes Mentuhotep's and Intef II's. So what does the actual original text say? Because it's been translated into English as royal ancestors, but I want to see what the original text actually says, because when people translate hieroglyphs, they are able to translate them as per their interpretation of the hieroglyphs. Just like in English we have various different synonyms for one particular word, you could theoretically choose different words translating things. So I want to see what that actually says. Does it literally say royal ancestors, or what is the actual term? Is it people who came before us, as in ancestors? And what is the word royal, and what does that word actually mean? The goals, the aims of doing this research project is to do independent research that is on my terms, that is something that I have chosen, not an essay that's been set by a professor or something that I think is one of those fundamental subjects to teach you, but something for me to be able to do independent research on my terms and something I've chosen, and to then write it up into a large scale sort of dissertation like I did at MA, so like 20,000 words maybe. I would love to publish it. I don't know if that will ever happen, but one option, if I don't publish it by writing for a journal or someone like that, is I might consider doing a PhD. I've always wanted to do a PhD, and I'll talk about this in another video, but it's definitely not on the cards now, and it may never be, but I think this would be a good research project. Okay, I've really talked a lot about Mentuhotep today, but I think it shows how excited I am to do this project, and I'm going to be working on it on and off for months and months and months. I don't think this project is going to go very quickly, because I hope that it will be really in depth and that I'll get loads of potentially original research done. I don't know if anybody has ever actually done research on this particular subject before. I'm going to be doing more vlogs on other research projects as well. So basically I have got a personal curriculum that I am going to be doing for my own knowledge, and then I'm going to be doing videos for teaching you fundamental things about ancient Egypt, and I'm going to do other things as well. So my next video that's coming out is going to be on me reorganizing my Egypt library. So I've decided to bring all my Egypt books down here into my bedroom, because this is the primary place where I either work or grab my books and notebooks and things like that. So I'm going to be popping my books on these shelves here and also behind you on my bookcase. So I am going to do a video where I move all the books and then organise them on my shelves, which I love watching those videos, so I hope you enjoy it. But for now, I'm going to sign off and I'm going to do some more research on king lists. So I will see you next time. Thank you so much for watching and please subscribe. Bye.